Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is Nikki and I'm really sorry that I've been away for quite some time. I've been wanting to come back and do some booktubing for ages, but life has that way of getting in the way. So I finally have some time this afternoon to sit down and talk about some spooky reads, because of course we are in spooky season. I'm so happy it's October. I am a real Halloween girl. I get a lot of people love Christmas. Me personally, Halloween, as you can see by my sweatshirt, I'm a huge Halloween fan. I'm a huge fan of the Halloween movie, the first one, I've got to say. So I wanted to come on and talk about spooky reads for the spooky season. So I've gone with sort of a little variety of different books. Some of them you may have read, some of them you may have not. Some you might be really familiar with it. We'll see how we go along. So without further ado, let's start with our first book of the spooky season, and that is The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. I've been a long time fan of this book. I recently rewatched the old BBC adaptation because I have seen the more modern movie with Daniel Radcliffe. And for anyone who's actually read this and then seen the Daniel Radcliffe movie, you will know that they did change the ending of the movie a little bit from the original book. And I have to say that the Daniel Radcliffe movie genuinely made me scream, because it was the jump scares in that film. They really got to me. But if you are able to go and find it, the old BBC, I think it's BBC adaptation of it, is actually also really, really good. It's really atmospheric. It's genuinely creepy. So the story is that you've got Arthur, who is a junior solicitor, who has been tasked with sorting out the estate of Alice Drablow of Eel House, who has passed away, and he's got to go out there and sort all her belongings out and basically get everything ready and sorted. And the house is reached, it's via, I can't think of what the word is now. There is a word that you have to sort of traverse. I can't think what it's called. It's remote, let's put it like that. And he eventually sort of kind of gets trapped out there because the fog descends and he can't get back across the causeway. That's the word I want. You have to reach it by a causeway. And he keeps hearing all these strange sounds and weird things go on. And it's genuinely, it is creepy. It is really, really, really creepy. And there is a local legend that says if you are to see if the woman in black appears, then it means a child is going to die. And well, does he see her? Well, you have to read the book and you will find out. But this is a fantastic ghost story by Susan Hill. I think it's very gothic. If you like gothic literature, so if maybe you're a fan of Dracula or Frankenstein, any of those sort of gothic novels, then this would 100% be up your street. And if you like it, then I would definitely recommend watch the Daniel Radcliffe version, because that's genuinely quite scary. But the BBC version, I think, is absolutely brilliant. Now, this one is for a bit of fun. Obviously, I'm 50 and I grew up in an era where we had Buffy and Angel, and I actually had a friend who had Sky TV, and when the new episodes got released, we would literally be around at her house on a Friday night watching them. So I watched Buffy and Angel as they aired, and I'm still to this day, I do still like them. I do view them slightly differently now through the eyes of someone obviously a little older than I was when they came on TV. But if you're lucky and you go into charity shops, you will often find Buffy books, and this was one that my husband stumbled across, and this is the novelisation of the episode The Harvest. Now, I had great fun reading this. It's really good fun. It's basically you're just reading an episode of Buffy. It doesn't really deviate from the original television version of this that you would have seen with the Master, and reading it was actually really good fun, because it did take me back to that sort of younger part of my life, because I think I was probably in my early 20s, I think, when Buffy aired on television, and it did take me back to that era of Buffy, and reading it, the dialogue and everything, you can just hear, the characters speaking the dialogue when you read this, and it still has that humour that Buffy had. I mean, like I say, I was a huge fan of Buffy and of Angel at the time they came out. I don't really watch them so much now. I do watch the odd episode. My favourite episode, well, weirdly, is actually one of the Halloween ones where they all turn into their costumes. I genuinely love that episode. But this, if you do come across any Buffy books in charity shops, and you do see them, I've seen them occasionally, and it's an episode that you will have liked, then they are worth finding and picking up, and they are worth a read. They are quite funny. So that's one of my recommendations. If you can find one, a Buffy book. Okay, staying with novelisations. Now, I'm going to preface it by saying I'm not a huge horror film fan. I have certain horror films that I like to watch, and this is one of them. I'm not very good with modern horror. It's too gory, it's too graphic. I can't really stomach it very well. But classic and old horror movies I will sit and watch, and this one is no exception. The Omen, and this is David Seltzer. Again, this is pretty much a novelisation of the film. If you've watched the film, then this is a really good read. I actually personally think that this is slightly better than the film. This has actually got a it's really creepy, and the tension really ramps up in this book. Damien is truly creepy, and the nanny that comes to look after him, I think she's creepier in the book than she is in the film. And we get a lot more in the book about her and the dog, and just it's really unsettling. And if you've if you've watched the film, again, when you come to read this, you can see it all playing out. I genuinely love The Omen, the first one. I think the little boy that plays Damien, he's just so creepy. And it's not a particularly horrifying film. Some of the effects are probably a bit funny by today's standards. I mean, there are some gruesome moments in it, I'm not going to lie. But I think with The Omen, again, it's more about the atmosphere and the tension and the suspense of it all building up, and that sort of supernatural element of them realising that their son may not be quite who they think he is. So again, if you can get your hands on The Omen and you want something spooky to read, I would definitely recommend that one. Staying with films, again, this is another horror film that I would actually say it's one of my comfort films. I watch it quite frequently. I'm also a huge fan of Alfred Hitchcock as well, I will say that. I think this and Rear Window are probably my two favourite Alfred Hitchcock films, and of course it is none other than Psycho. This is Robert Bloch's Psycho. This is, again, the other thing with this and The Omen, these are quite short reads, and actually the Woman in Black, these are quite short reads. So if you want something quick and easy to read as you're going through October, these are really good. Now, what I love about Psycho, again, if you've watched the film, this really doesn't deviate very much from the film. It pretty much follows it very faithfully. And again, if you've watched the film, you can visualise Norman. I mean, Anthony Perkins is Norman Bates. Oh my God, he's so sinister. He's so creepy. But what I love about the book is you get a little bit more view into Norman's psyche. You hear a lot of conversations between him and his mother. And although you get those conversations in the film, you don't get them as much depth as you do in the book. I think the thing with books and novelisations is they can embellish and they can add a little bit more to them, and they certainly do with Psycho. If you've never watched Psycho, then obviously I am not going to spoil it for you. Most of us are aware of the very famous shower scene in Psycho. I think it's so ingrained in popular culture. But the thing with Psycho is that when the film starts, it's almost like it's like a red herring, really. And the film starts off in a certain direction with Marion, and then takes a complete turn and goes off kilter and does not go in the way that maybe you think it was going to go. And the film isn't actually about if you've never watched it, when you start watching it, you think it's going to be about a certain subject, and it's not. It just goes completely throws you. And I think that's how Alfred Hitchcock's, it's so cleverly done and really cleverly shot, because it's all shot in black and white. So again, it's not particularly gory because it's black and white. Any blood you see, it doesn't really look like blood. But again, it's the thing with Psycho, it's the tension and the creepiness and the psychology of it with Norman, and the way that he is and the way that it's done. It's so clever. So if you do, and you can, this is quite an old copy. In fact, you can see how old this is because this cost £1.25. I think, again, this was a charity shop find. These are always worth looking for in charity shops. You do come across them, particularly in places like the Oxfam bookshops are really good for them. But Waterstones do have a newer version of this if you're looking to pick it up. Changing tack for a moment, we're going to go with Japanese fiction. Now, this has actually been made into a version on Netflix, I believe. I haven't watched, I think it's on Netflix. Forgive me if it's not. I haven't watched it, but I came across this book in a charity shop and I kind of recognised the title, and then I read the synopsis and realised that this was a Netflix thing that my friend at work had mentioned to me, but I didn't realise at the time that it was a Japanese author, and that is Strangers. Now, this is a ghost story. If you've lost a parent, or maybe lost both of your parents, this I think will really resonate with you. So this follows a man who's called Harada, and he's navigating life after a divorce, and he writes for television. And one day he just happens to go to a theatre, and he sees a man sat a few seats down from him, and this man uncannily looks like his father. But his father and his mother have both passed away in a really unfortunate accident. But the man, not only does he look like his father, he looks like his father at the father at his age would have been when his father passed away. So he's really intrigued. He's like, that's really strange. This man looks like my father. And it goes on from there. And I think it's beautifully written, quite suspenseful in places, a proper chilling ghost story, but also a story about grief and losing parents. And if you've ever lost a parent, which very sadly I did lose my father last year. My dad passed away just over a year ago now. And so it did resonate with me. How would I feel if I could see my dad again? You know, and it's very cleverly written, but also has quite a twist to this story, a twist that you don't see coming. So there's a couple of layers to this story, very, very cleverly written. And I think with a lot of Japanese fiction, they do touch, a lot of Japanese fiction I've personally read does touch a lot on grief and death, and quite often grief or the loss of parents. So do bear that in mind. Obviously, if that's not a subject matter that you want to read about, if that's going to be an issue or might upset you, then maybe steer clear of this one. But honestly, I'm really glad I read this. I actually found this again in a charity shop. You actually do see this one in charity shops quite frequently. I definitely say it was worth a read. It's very intriguing, very mysterious, but also quite sad. Sorry, I'm burpy today. It's also quite sad. So that's definitely worth a read. Now, I don't think any list would be complete without the inclusion of Stephen King. And we've got two today. Now, I felt that we couldn't do the spooky season justice without the original Stephen King of Carrie. Now, this version of Carrie I think is absolutely stunning. It is the 50th anniversary version. In fact, today while I was out in Waterstones, I actually saw a 50th anniversary of Salem's Lot in the same style as this. I had to have this. I actually genuinely love Carrie. I think Carrie is a fantastic novel, although it's obviously a very early novel of Stephen King. But you can see when you read it what was to come, or what still is to come, because he's still with us and he's still writing very prolifically. But this is absolutely fantastic. I'm sure by now most of you know the storyline of Carrie. But Carrie is a teenage girl who has a very strange, very religious mother who really hasn't explained much about life to Carrie. And Carrie, very unfortunately, starts to have a period at school and doesn't understand what on earth is going on and is being bullied by the other girls around her. But Carrie isn't like other girls in the fact that Carrie maybe has supernatural powers. And this story takes quite a horrifying turn at times and doesn't pull any punches. Definitely not. But I absolutely love Carrie. I think it's still to this day really holds up as a classic Stephen King horror, and also shows just how cruel we can be to each other, especially when we're teenagers. But also what happens when someone decides to retaliate, and and the horror that ensues when that happens. So if you're looking for a Stephen King, I would definitely recommend Carrie. And if you do like Carrie and you've not got this version, this is well worth looking for. I think it's absolutely stunning. Like the inside's like red. It's such a fantastic version of Carrie. Now we're going to stay with Stephen King for a moment, and we're going to do a Stephen King that I think is not, I don't know how much this is talked about. This is said to have one of Stephen King's most terrifying endings. I think it is terrifying, but I think it's more disconcerting as an ending to a book, and that is Revival. Now, I read this very recently, and I actually went into this book completely blind. I had no idea what the sort of synopsis or storyline of this book was, but this follows the story of a young lad called Jamie, who lives in a small town, and he comes from quite a sort of a religious background. And we start in like the sort of early 60s, and Jamie meets the new local pastor. And the new local pastor, Reverend Jacobs, has a thing for doing experiments with electricity. He's fascinated by electricity. And this book basically follows Jamie throughout his life and what happens to him, but not only what happens to him, but what also happens to the pastor. I would liken part of this book to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I think there's definitely elements of that in there. Again, I'd say this book is quite unsettling and disconcerting. And as I was reading it, I couldn't quite grasp where it was going. And really tragic in places, quite a tragic story. But I think it's also a book that will stay with you after you've read it. And again, it does deal with the themes of grief and loss, and also religion, and what happens if you are a religious person and you lose your spirituality, I can't speak today, and have a crisis of faith, and it looks at all of that. And the ending is, I think it is terrifying. I think it's very unsettling. I don't want to say any more than that. I don't want to give it away. But if you've not read Revival or you don't know much about it, it's definitely one to read. I think it's one of Stephen King's underrated novels. I don't feel like it's a novel you hear people talk about. When we talk about Stephen King, it's usually It, The Shining, Pet Sematary, Carrie, Salem's Lot. It's always, Christine. It's always those books that we think about with Stephen King. But this one is just... it's standout. Also, I found that this was not too long for Stephen King, because some of his are quite hefty tomes, aren't they? And a quick read. This is a fast-paced book. You get through it fairly quickly. But I think this is well worth a read for a Halloween, for a spooky read, definitely. Staying within the Stephen King family, if you like, we're going to move on to an author that I discovered, I don't know if it was last year or early this year, and that is Joe Hill. Now, for those of you who don't know, most of you probably do, but Joe Hill is one of Stephen King's sons, but he chooses not to write under the surname of King. He chooses to write under the name of Joe Hill, and this I love. This is Heart-Shaped Box. This is genuinely quite a ride of a book. This is about an aging rock star who buys unusual artifacts, shall we say. And one of the artifacts he decides to buy that's at auction is a haunted suit. But let's say he lives to regret that decision. Because this haunted suit and all the things that come with it start to completely wreak havoc on his life and cause a huge chain of events. This is absolutely fantastic. It had me glued to this one. if you like Stephen King, then I think you would like Joe Hill. His style of writing, I think, is very similar to his father. The same sort of horror tropes come through. We've got the supernatural elements in this one. I like the fact that it's this kind of aging rock star. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's a really good book and really clever, because it's got a lot of layers to it. And again, as the story unfolds, you're like, oh, okay, and you sort of see where it's going. So if you want to sort of a Joe Hill, I would definitely recommend trying Heart-Shaped Box. I feel like I'm leaving the best for last. This is an author I discovered via my husband. My husband read one of his books. And then I actually started off by reading some of his short stories, which I will talk about in a moment. And I've now read about 5 of his novels. I think 3 of his novels and 2 of his short stories. And this is the last one I read. And I was really so keen to read that. And this is Horrorstör by Grady Hendrix. Now, I would say you need to buy this book just for the fact that it looks like an IKEA catalogue alone. It's absolutely fantastic. If I open it up inside, you can see you have like even a shop that looks like IKEA, and you have the floor plan of the store. So this revolves around a store called Orsk. Orsk is basically a version of IKEA, with a slight twist though, that overnight strange things keep happening in Orsk. So a group of the employees decide to take it upon themselves to spend the night there and work out what is going on. Let's just say mayhem, terror and gruesome events ensue. With Grady Hendrix doesn't really doesn't shy away from being gruesome. That's me saying I don't really like gory horror movies. I can cope with more horror and gruesomeness when I read novels, and Grady Hendrix definitely doesn't pull any punches. What I really love about this book though is that you have all these things in it about the home delivery service, and when you actually start reading it, every chapter has a furniture thing on the front with the name of the furniture, and that goes all the way through. This was a really fun read. If you like horror with a bit of tongue-in-cheek and a bit of cheesiness and silliness thrown in, then Grady Hendrix is 100% the author for you. I would never read one of his books to take it seriously. I have seen people say, oh, he's really cheesy, and I'm like, yeah, well, he's meant to be. That's kind of his thing. That's his shtick. He's cheesy, he's funny, he's tongue-in-cheek, and Horrorstör is absolutely no exception to that rule. I even like the fact that on this you even have like the prices on the things as well. It's, you know, it's deliberately made to look like a IKEA catalogue. And I've never found a fiction book that's been made to look like that. And I think that's the thing about it. It's just so unique in the way that it's done. But terror and horror definitely ensues with this book. It's fast-paced, it's funny, it's good. It's also kind of having a bit of a dig at corporate and the retail world as well. I think, you know, there's that underpinning it. If you like Grady Hendrix, and if, like me, you have a Kindle, now I do pay for Kindle Unlimited, and as a part of that, Amazon do collections of short stories, and Grady Hendrix has written a couple for some of the Kindle Unlimited short stories they do. There's one set called Creature Feature, and he's got one in there called Ankle Snatcher. I think it's the Ankle Snatcher, which I recently read. These stories are very short. That's absolutely brilliant. And that's all about the monsters under your bed. I think that's the thing with Grady Hendrix. Grady Hendrix feeds into those childhood terrors that a lot of us have always had with the monsters under our beds. And the Ankle Snatcher is no exception to that. If you have Kindle Unlimited, do look at the Creature Feature. There's also another collection of horror stories. And forgive me because I can't remember what they're called. But Grady Hendrix has written one called The Blanks. Now that was the first Grady Hendrix that I ever read. And it's a little short story. And I would say that if you are a parent, if you have children, it will chill you to the bone, that one. It's genuinely terrifying. It's about a story called and these creatures are called the Blanks, and you mustn't look at them. Think a bit like Weeping Angels, maybe that kind of vein. There's a definite similarity. If you like the Doctor Who story, The Weeping Angels, then The Blanks would be one for you. Within those collections of horror stories, you also get short stories written by Joe Hill. There is a Joe Hill short story, I should have brought my Kindle in, and it's called The Ushers. If It's brilliant. I think it was actually the first Joe Hill I ever read, and the ushers are the people that literally usher you when it's time for you to depart this world. And if you see the ushers, then unfortunately it means that your time is due to come soon. Absolutely brilliant. Really, gosh, what's the word I'm looking for? Really tense, really suspenseful, but also quite sad. Because obviously you're looking at death and all those things that come with it. But those short stories on Amazon are brilliant. I think there's one called The Pram by Joe Hill that I read as well, which is really quite terrifying. There's a few that are really, really good. And if you do have Kindle Unlimited, then do look at those because they're really brilliant and they're really good short stories to read for the spooky season. So that wraps up what I would recommend reading. But I will say, if you haven't read On the Store, even if you don't want to read it for the spooky season, just have it for the book alone. I will say actually that I got this I actually found this on Vinted for £3, because the only thing with these books is they're not desperately cheap to buy sometimes, but they are 100% worth it. So please let me know in the comments if you have any recommendations for spooky season and what you would like to read. And I hope you all have a lovely spooky season and a happy Halloween, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.